In my opinion, there are a lot of people who crave titles more than transformation, who seek positions more than purpose. But leadership isn't about a title. They love the crown, but hate the cross. They want authority, but refuse accountability. If serving is beneath you, leadership is beyond you. You should just be a servant. You should be somebody who serves. You show up early. You stay late. You go above and beyond. You take people out to dinner. And again, not to get something out of them, but to put something in them. Weak and insecure leaders create weak and confused teams. Fear fuels their decisions instead of faith. Pride makes me the hero. Confidence makes Jesus the hero. Humility makes Jesus the hero. Be a leader who is fueled by faith, not fear, because that is absolutely being reproduced in your culture. If you're called to lead, step up. If you're seeking a title but can't lead, seek growth first. Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. This week's going to be a big week as we talk about this topic, leadership without leadership. What do I mean by this? In my opinion, there are a lot of people who crave titles more than transformation, who seek positions more than purpose. But leadership isn't about a title. It's about serving people with strength, humility, and vision. So today we're going to be talking about this topic or this thought, the danger of leadership without leadership. And again, we're going to go over some key signs of leadership without leadership. And again, it's a really big responsibility and weight for us to be in ministry, to care for people, to love people, to share common mission with people. I've been in ministry for 10 years, really full time since I was 15. And what I mean by that was when I gave my life to Jesus, I was all in. There was no such thing as aspirational position. There was no such thing as me just wanting authority without service. And I'm not saying I haven't struggled with that, but when I first gave my life to Jesus, what ended up happening was I had no concept of ministry. I had no concept of church. I had no concept of what it meant to be a pastor, to be a leader. And a lot of times what ends up happening is we get into this comparison trap. We get into this concept of really image management where we care about other people's platforms and influence rather than looking at our own. And I feel like I struggled with this in my super early 20s, so like 19 to probably 21. I tried my best to, again, kind of just get into that influence world, see how many people could know me because of my position. And now in hindsight, obviously, what ended up happening was you realize how many people you affect by this concept. You can't serve two things at once. So again, I'm going to give you some key signs here of leadership without leadership. And we're just going to dive into it. And again, I'm just going to submit these thoughts to you. Again, I've been doing this a minute, been a part of 3 church plants. My wife and I are executive pastors. We have an incredible team. We serve in Phoenix. And again, it is our literal biggest privilege in life, besides just the simple fact of us being saved by grace through faith, that we get to lead people, that there's real people who are looking at us as their pastors, as their leaders. And we don't take that as just another thing. We didn't move to Phoenix to get a title or a position. We moved to Phoenix because there were people who needed a church and there's a God who needed to be worshiped. So we're here and we're trying our best. So let's jump into some key signs of leadership without leadership. Number 1, they want the title, but not the responsibility. A lot of this is going to be around this concept of chasing position, chasing titles. And just to be clear, this is about as obvious as you get, because when I was in Bible college, everybody talked about this progression. That again, I had no concept of that. You start in ministry as maybe associate youth pastor, then you're a youth pastor, and then you're a campus pastor, and then you're associate pastor, and then you're an executive pastor, and then you're a lead pastor. And then what ends up happening though is no matter which position, or you might just be a team leader, you might just be serving your church, you might not even be a Christian. You just might like this concept of leadership. But the reality is when you love titles, what ends up happening is you make the title the big deal instead of the responsibility. Make the responsibility the big deal. I like to say it like this: they love the crown, but hate the cross. They want authority, but refuse accountability. I cannot stand this concept. I'm telling you, you got to get rid of chasing titles. Because the reality is if you solve problems and you serve people instead of use people, you'll always have great people around you. So for me, in my house, we will serve the Lord, which means we don't care if we're in the parking lot, if we're in a church of 50 or 5,000, you're going to find the Andrews serving and loving people. Have I gotten this wrong in the past? 100%. Have I struggled with this? Yes, absolutely. I'm just saying in hindsight, I wish I would have just taken more responsibility than just seeked titles. Because the reality is once you get the title, it doesn't matter. Because most people will get the title after they're already living in something. I can't trust somebody who needs the title before they can do the responsibility. Because again, they love the crown, hate the cross. And a part of leadership is dying to yourself, dying to your flesh, dying to your personality, dying to your preferences, and seeking God's plan. So you got to love the crown and the cross. The crown, really what I mean by that is the authority that you're assuming that you have based on a position. And you and I know this, that authority is really not even found in your position or your title, because positions and titles are the most entry-level leadership. Any person who walks in the room and says, I'm the boss, they're not the boss. So they want the title, not the responsibility. And these are three really bigger ideas around this concept of they want the title, but not the responsibility. Like I said, they love the crown, hate the cross. They chase influence, but neglect impact. They want to be seen, but they don't want to serve. If serving is beneath you, leadership is beyond you. Do you want to be a leader? You have to be the CSO of your organization, the chief servant officer. You can't have influence without impact. You have to impact people's lives one by one, and that's how you acquire influence. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a person who believes that you just have to strive for buy-in. I'm not that type of person where I'm going to try to manipulate my way to get you to be bought into me. That's not who we are as a family, and I'm going to submit to you that that's not how you should be. You know what you should be? You should just be a servant. You should be somebody who serves. You show up early. You stay late. You go above and beyond. You take people out to dinner. And again, not to get something out of them, but to put something in them. Your responsibility as a pastor and a leader is to impart something in them or deposit something in them. It might be a compliment. And by the way, if you're not praying for your team, you're not pastoring your team. If you're not loving your team, potentially it's not your team. So the biggest responsibilities in your life are always going to come back to the massive impact you had based on serving, or the opposite, because you think that your primary responsibility is to be seen. And the problem with this in 2025 is that we all have social media. You're listening to a podcast right now. And the reality is most people just naturally in 2025 assume that they're relevant. And assuming relevance is a dangerous place because you're assuming that you're making an impact. You're assuming you're serving. And assuming that without seeing any fruit is blinded. And you don't want to do that. You can't chase influence but neglect impact. And the last thought around this first point is you crave attention but reject action. You need validation, but you don't want to do the work. The problem with this, again, I'm giving you some problems and I'm going to give you some solutions. You can't seek validation as a leader. You have to be secure enough that you are an image bearer of Christ. You're serving Jesus. You're making a difference no matter what position you're in, no matter what level of authority you are. And by the way, the people who struggle with the most are the people that if you remove that title from them, they'll leave. And early on in the days, we all know this in church planning and church leadership, we give position away. We give titles away because we think that's how we're actually going to carry retention in our churches. Yes, and what you're going to end up having is that's going to be reproduced in your culture. That you're going to have an entitled leader who carries no authority and doesn't serve. That's being reproduced in your culture because they're craving attention, yet not having any impact or not having any action. They're seeking validation, but they don't want to do the work. Because the reality is, you and I know this, ministry takes grit. Ministry takes discipline. Ministry takes a specific calling. And yes, I believe that we should give people opportunity, that we should throw people in, that we should never be a lid to somebody else's growth. And we also have to be very aware of how that is being reproduced in our culture. Because that honestly is just lazy. That you don't want to do the work to lead them and to develop them. You would rather give them a title so that they stick around. And I'm just not into it. I'm not into having helpers around. I'm not into having doers around. I want leaders. I want people who are problem solvers, with or without titles, that they're there to serve. They're there to problem solve. They're there to love the city that they are a part of. So I'm going to give you a verse here, and then we're going to jump into a next thought here. James 1:22 says, "Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." I'm submitting to you that there's a lot of people that are leaders who are also deceivers, or they're deceived themselves because they think they're actually making an impact. They think there's tangible fruit on their life, but nobody's being honest with them. Part of being a leader is turning around and seeing who's following you. Part of being a leader is having followers. And a lot of us, to be honest, would turn around and find nobody following us. There would be nobody who's actually following us because they get to, because they have to based on position. So I'm just submitting to you, be a doer, not just a hearer. Don't just be a beer either, by the way. If there's practical things that can be solved in your organization, you are actually the person who's supposed to be solving them. So you can't want titles without responsibility. And number two, write this down. Weak and insecure leaders create weak and confused teams. Fear fuels their decisions instead of faith. That's my question to you. Is fear fueling your decisions instead of faith? We talked about this a little bit in the first key point, this concept of early on in church, somebody has a pulse, we say that they have a purpose. And yes, I do believe that. I do believe that there's a corporate call and mandate for every Christian on the planet to seek and save which was lost. 100%. There's a missional call and there's a leadership call, that there's actually things that you as a leader in God's house should not be aspirational. Me having one wife is not aspirational. Me loving my son is not aspirational. I'm doing it. I'm living it. There's a level of integrity. There's a level of submission to authority that I have to embody. And again, you can see it from a mile away. You can see this on the person because what they have is they have weak and confused leaders. You can say it like that. Weak and insecure leaders create weak and insecure leaders. Because we know this, we teach what you know, that you can teach all you know, but you reproduce who you are. So the actual version of yourself, not the JV version of your pastor, not the JV version of the influencer that you follow, that you emulate, the actual version of yourself is being reproduced in other people. That means if you have a title problem, that if you have a conviction problem, what's going to end up happening? In 6 months, you're going to have that imparted in your team, that you actually deposited something negative in your spirit. Leaders listening to this, that's why we have to have eyes. That's why we have to have discernment, that we have to listen to the Holy Spirit about people. That just as much as, man, I see something in that person, that doesn't always mean that that's good. That means that I have to be a protector and defender of our culture. Fear fuels your decision-making instead of faith. Man, I got to be a faith-led leader, not a fear-led leader. They lead from insecurity, not from confidence. Not arrogance, by the way, not pride. Pride makes me the hero. Confidence makes Jesus the hero. Humility makes Jesus the hero. How about that? I don't get the wins. Something that I have intentionally always done in our leadership, even Lexi, my wife, is so good at this. She never gets the credit. We fight to delegate the credit. If there was a time where I even took credit, Lexi would check me and say, yo, we don't do that. We don't take the credit. We take the losses. We give away the credit, and yet we take the losses. So be a leader who is fueled by faith, not fear, because that is absolutely being reproduced in your culture. You navigate by opinions instead of vision. Without direction, the team is lost. Direction is way more important than speed. A lot of leaders, to be honest, insecure leaders, seek speed, that they think that they need to have growth in X amount of time. They need to have this amount of pastors in this amount of time. You need to be in a position in this amount of time. You maybe have an internal timeline in your head. All right, in 7 months, I'm going to lead this thing. That's a really unhealthy thought, I'm going to be honest. And I can't say that I haven't struggled with that, obviously. We all have. I'm just submitting these to you. But you have to be a person who can navigate by vision, not opinions. By the way, you have one vision. Everybody gets to have their own vision in a church. You have the corporate global vision of the church, and that is actually micro scale down into your church. That God spoke to your lead pastors and gave them a vision. That is the vision. That if you have a separate vision, if there's two visions, two is die. That's die vision. That means you have division in your house. And be honest about that, by the way. If you have ulterior motives that you want to be a church planner in 5 years, but you can't vocalize that, just vocalize it. And if your leader is too insecure to carry your dreams, you have the wrong leader. Because again, this is a clear tell sign for me that when I'm talking to the pastors that I coach and they tell me my team's just lost, I feel like my team doesn't get it, I feel like my team just isn't leading. It's no, I feel like you're not leading them. I feel like you're not giving them vision. I feel like you're not leading them to make decisions, because indecision is a decision. So without direction, the team's lost. That's a scary place to live, because they're now dependent on you. That you feel like that if you do all the tasks and give them space to dream, you're actually not the leader. The leader helps people understand that a task is not just to be done, but they're actually being developed and their character is being built, and the church is being built through that. So you can't navigate by opinion. You need to navigate by vision. And last thought here on this is they let problems grow instead of calling them out. This is a big one to me. Avoiding issues doesn't make them go away. It makes them bigger. What you don't confront absolutely will grow in your church, will grow in your organization. I like to say it like this. There's no elephants in the room. There's no elephants in the room. If we can just say it and just call it what it is, if there's a literal elephant in the room, I would hope that you would say something. That you wouldn't just, I hope that he just finally discovers it. No, man, we got to be honest. And if we can't be honest with one another as a leadership team, as a staff, it's going to be a really long journey ahead. So you can't let problems grow instead of calling them out. You got to look beyond this simple thing that's wrong. You have to look at the bigger picture, because again, what you don't correct will absolutely be reproduced in your culture. Culture, by the way, is anything that you create or tolerate. So if you created it and it's being reproduced, beautiful, but you're also tolerating things. And to me, that's a big weight that you're not ready to carry or you're not wanting to carry. And to me, that's part of being a leader. Welcome to the club. We all have conversations we don't want to have. We all challenge people that potentially aren't going to get it. And that's okay. Your responsibility is obedience. The outcome is up to God. 2 Timothy 1:7. You and I know this one by memory, hopefully. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. So the consequences of being a weak and insecure leader are no clarity, no confidence, and no conviction. If you feel like there's a lack of clarity on your team, then maybe everyone doesn't actually understand the unified mission you don't feel like there's a lot of confidence in your leaders to make decisions, to challenge and confront peer to peer even, and if you feel like there's a less than conviction, that again, people will initially care about your organization or care about you, then they'll connect with someone, they'll connect with the vision, they'll connect with the mission, they'll connect with something that you're doing, that they, man, I want to be a part of this. Then they have conviction. If they don't have conviction, that means that there's a gap there, that they either don't care about it or they're not connected to it. So if you can get them to care about someone or something, usually that just looks like organic friendships and relationships, then they can get connected to the vision, to the person, to the leaders, to the pastors, then they can have conviction. So if you're seeing that, that's the fruit of the root of having a weak and insecure leader. The second consequence is no direction, no development, and no discipleship. Third, no correction, no courage, no change. If God's called you to lead, he equips you to lead with boldness, not with baggage. Man, oh man, is leadership a mirror? That somewhere in our life, you and I realize, if you can realize this, you're going to grow and you're going to be exponentially beyond you could even ask, think, or imagine, that your baggage is actually carrying more weight in your leadership than you realize. That insecurity in your life, the word that a coach said to you, a word that your dad said to you, actually does impact the way you lead and love others, the way you lead and love your spouse. And we would say that in a marriage counseling, but we won't say that about ourselves in the leadership context. If God's called you to lead, he equips you to lead with boldness, not with baggage. Do not be a leader who leads with baggage, because the consequences of you being a weak and insecure leader are no clarity, no confidence, no conviction, no direction, no development, no discipleship, no correction, no courage, and no change. Number 3, they seek a title for identity, not calling. You want a position, but you don't want the process. I've even said it like this: a lot of people want the platform, very few people want to trust the process. You want a promotion without preparation. And to me, that is somebody who is not ready to carry the weight of a high capacity role in an organization, especially in a church. Because again, people matter too much for us to work through our insecurities with them. I'm not saying you have to be perfect to lead. No way. I don't believe that's even a reality or a possibility. Now, you and I actually have to get to a place, though, that I'm not seeking promotion. I understand that promotion comes from God, that there's a level in which I can try to manipulate my way into something. And by the way, you're going to tell on yourself in about 6 months. You can fake it for 6 months. You can fake leadership for 6 months. At some point, people are going to start to realize you're not who you communicated you are. That your resume speaks louder than your results. And to me, man, I'm looking at results. I'm looking at fruit. I'm looking at, can you develop somebody? Can you build somebody? Don't want position without the process. That to me is a big deal, because that's all it is. Even when you're a lead pastor, by the way, you're still in process. There's still a development happening in your life. There's still growth happening in your life. That, man, if I just want a position and I want the process, or if I want the platform but I don't want the process, it's like this. There's people online who buy followers. There's people who go on Instagram or go on whatever platform and they buy followers. The engagement is poor. A lot of people, to be honest, in the church buy followers. By what? Their position, their title, not calling. Because if you are marked by God, you will not have to be marketed by man. And to me, that's a big responsibility and a big weight. And for you and I to carry the weight with stewardship and awareness that this is much bigger than me. This is much bigger than one generation. There are lineages attached to you finding security in Christ. So don't seek titles for your identity. Seek it for your calling. They seek the title, but not the testimony. A title won't make you a leader. Testimonies and faithfulness will. How about this testimony? I would love Easter 2026 of your church to have this testimony. Somebody who's served in your church more than 5 years and doesn't have a title. That they don't want to be a famous superstar. They want to be a faithful servant. That they're just being there every single Sunday. They're showing up with a great spirit, with a great attitude. They're serving people because God's done so much in their life. They don't care about titles. They don't care about holding microphones. How about that testimony? We always want to have the extreme mass chaos ones. How about that testimony? They're not seeking titles. They're seeking testimonies. And to me, that's somebody who is truthfully a world changer. Last thought around this, that you're seeking a title for identity, not calling, is you desire recognition, but not refinement. If you won't let God shape you, you can't steward what he gives you. I'm going to say that one again so you can write it down. If you won't let God shape you, you can't steward what he gives you. Galatians 1:10 says, if I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Man, do I have to let God refine me. Man, do I have to let God challenge me. Man, do I have to let people challenge me. That the authority that I'm submitted to has absolute permission, or don't have permission. They're still going to do it, and I'm submitted to it. The unfiltered truth that you and I have blind spots in our lives, that you and I have real challenges and hurts, habits, and hangups in our life that somebody in our life should have authority to speak to. Most and primarily God. That happens in the secret place. You and I need to sit in prayer with a journal out and ask God, how do I need to grow in this season for the influence that you've given me? What do I need to be challenged and grown in? Last year, for me, it was a persistent and consistent prayer that God would soften my heart, that he would soften my heart for the things that he loves, which is people, which is beautiful, the church, that the body of Christ, that my heart would be softened to it. And I felt a difference because every day it was on my reminder, God, soften my heart. So you can't desire recognition without desiring refinement. That you should actually see progress in your life, that the people that you are leading, you should actually see change. And I'm not saying change just to be different. I'm saying change to be developed. So here's an example. Someone fights for a leadership title, but struggles with deep insecurity, needing external validation to feel significant. You can lie for 6 months about who you are, and I promise you it's going to come out one way or another. You absolutely will get exposed if you don't get honest with yourself. Leadership isn't about being seen, it's about being sent. It's not about being seen, it's about being sent. That there's a level of faithfulness that has to happen in your life. There's a level of stewardship that has to happen in your life. There's a level of honesty that a lot of people, in my opinion, are just not willing to have. That they don't want to sit with themselves. They don't want to honestly stop and pause and reflect and ask God, who am I? And what am I trying to do? What are my motives? God, by the way, answers your motives, not just your mouth. That the prayer that you think is so exceptional and God's so pleased by it. Yes, he loves you and he's your father. He sees through it. He sees the motive. He's going to answer the motive, not just your eloquent mouth. So if you won't let God shape you, you can't steward what he gives you. You got to seek refinement. Leadership, again, isn't about being seen. It's about being sent. So my question to you as we wrap up here, are we raising strong or weak leaders in our churches? It's 2025. We got to have strong leaders. We got to have resilient leaders. We got to have persistent leaders. We got to have fat leaders, faithful, available, and teachable. If you're called to lead, step up. If you're seeking a title but can't lead, seek growth first. Still serve, still challenge, still read the Bible, still be submitted to leadership, but don't seek titles. Don't seek position. Be a person who can solve problems, who can stay the course. And I promise you, in due time, God will promote you because you've been faithful with little. And he who is faithful with little can be faithful with much. So I'm going to read these 3 points again. Just some key signs of leadership without leadership is they want the title, but not the responsibility. Do you want a title without responsibility? Are you understanding the fact that, number 2, weak and insecure leaders create weak and confused teams? Fear fuels your decisions instead of faith. You can't navigate by opinions. You have to be a person who's navigated by vision. You let problems grow instead of calling them out. If God called you to lead, he equips you to lead with boldness, not with baggage. And last but not least, you seek a title for your identity, not your calling. A title won't make you a leader. Testimonies and faithfulness will. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Conversations. We're going to continue to put these episodes out to challenge you, to encourage you, to build you up, because I believe if you can be a strong, resilient leader, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people attached to your influence. We'll see you next week.